Alright, howdy folks. Today I'm going to be ranking the Friday the 13th franchise. Now, originally I was going to wait and do this until the next Friday the 13th, but that's not until November, and right now it's April. So then I was going to wait and do it on the 40th anniversary, which I looked up, and that's in June. So screw it, I'm just going to do it now. Starting off way down at the bottom, number 12 is Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. This movie had potential, but oh my god, it wasted most of it. It has a few good things, but not much. The rooftop fight between Jason and Julius is awesome. I love the decapitation.
These are combos keep the feet light. This is it. Your best shot. Motherfucker.
And then you see the first-person POV shot of the head falling down. Which was achieved by stuffing a camera inside of some kind of ball and literally throwing it off the roof. The shot of Jason in Times Square is awesome. And Jason's look is pretty good, I guess. That's about it. Jason looks cool when he has the mask on, but that face is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. The acting sucks for the most part. Most of the kills are pretty lame, and the title is a lie. Jason doesn't take Manhattan, he takes a boat and then briefly visits Manhattan. Also, apparently the sewers in Manhattan are flooded with toxic waste every night at midnight. Holy shit.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong.
I was born 9 years after this movie came out, and even I know that's total bullshit. And finally, this movie is 100 minutes long, but it feels much longer because it just drags so much. This movie is bad, and you should only watch it if you're marathoning the franchise and you don't mind sitting through about an hour and a half of bullshit to get to the good stuff. My score for this one is 1.5 out of 5. Alright, moving up from the diarrhea to the regular crap. Number 11 is Part 5, A New Beginning. Starting off with the positives, I do like John Shepherd as Tommy Jarvis. I think he's the worst of the three actors to play the character, but he's still good, and he's a total badass.
Fuck you,
So that's cool. Some of the kills are pretty cool. The garrote around the tree was pretty brutal, and they gouged out eyes. That was kind of neat. And finally, Ethel, the potty-mouthed redneck, is delightful.
Morning, Ethel. My, don't you look lovely today.
Horse shit.
Now, Sheriff, you better hear me and hear me good. I want this loony bin closed down. Do you hear me, fella? Now, these kids ain't nothing but trouble. They don't respect others' property, and they're all crazy.
You tell him, Ma!
That's the least kids weren't doing.
Doing? You think I don't know what those two perverts were doing in my yard?
Say it like you mean it, Ma!
Would you shut the fuck up?
She is the best part of the movie. Now on to the bad. This movie was made by a porn director. I am not kidding, look it up. And it shows. This movie is sleazy. Like, very, very sleazy. Women flash their tits for literally no reason other than the sake of the audience. And normally, like, I know with these slasher movies, nudity is a trope. But this is just excessive. The whole mystery of the killer's identity thing had potential, but it honestly feels like they took every character whose name we knew, put them all in a hat, and drew one out at random, and we ended up with Roy Burns. At the end of the day, it's not as bad as Part 8, but not good either. I don't really recommend it. My score for this one is 2 out of 5. Alright, Out of Hell and Into Purgatory. My number 10 is Part 7, The New Blood. On the good side of things, this movie has the coolest looking Jason in the entire franchise. I love how rotted and decayed he looks, but not like in a bad, cheesy way like in Part 8. This was the first appearance of Kane Hodder in the role, and he really makes it his own. He is amazing. And I like that this movie gives us the closest thing we'll ever get to a Jason versus Carrie fight. And the last 15 minutes of this movie, not counting like the very, very end, are like genuinely great. And finally, Lar Park Lincoln is really good as Tina. Now on to the negatives. First off, the other teens. The actors, most of those actors give at least decent performances, but Jesus Christ, they are playing the least defined characters in the series. You have the wholesome hot guy, the bitchy hot rich chick, the sci-fi geek, the stoner, representations for both sides of the Madonna whore complex, and the token black couple. Then there's the ending. Tina's dead father bursting through the dock and dragging Jason down to the lake is almost as stupid as that toxic waste thing from Part 8. And also, the last 15 minutes are great, but most of the rest of the movie is just so boring. They spend way too much time on these cardboard cutouts masquerading as characters and not enough time on Jason. Now, at the end of the day, The New Blood isn't completely awful, but I don't really recommend it. Score is 2.25 out of 5. Funnily enough, my number 9 is the 9th movie in the franchise, Jason Goes to Hell. I've always had mixed feelings about this one. It does a lot of things right and a lot of things wrong. On the good side of things, the acting is some of the best in the franchise. John D. LeMay, Carrie Keegan, and Stephen Williams all give solid performances. LeMay's character, Stephen, who is pretty much the protagonist, he looks like a nerd, but he's a total badass. And Creighton Duke is delightfully crazy.
Come on, get up.
Why don't you blow me, Chief? Right after your girlfriend there gets through.
That's my lady you're talking about.
Well, now, see, she is only your lady because she ain't had a taste of the Duke yet.
This movie also has some of the best gore in the franchise. If you watch horror movies for the carnage candy, I highly recommend this one. It is gruesome. And I do appreciate that this movie at least tried to do something different. It didn't completely succeed, but A for effort. And finally, I absolutely love this movie's opening scene. It is a great subversion of expectations. Alright, now on to the negatives. First off, this movie was directed by a first-time director. It was written in 4 days, and the crew were all relative newcomers. And it shows. I wouldn't say it's poorly made, but it feels very amateur at times. There's an action scene in a diner that uses way too much slow motion. The plot is kind of a mess. And the movie literally ends with the heroes walking off into the sunrise together. Jesus Christ. And this movie barely has any Jason. I know. That was one of Sean Cunningham's stipulations about coming back because he had been absent since the first movie. Because he's never been a fan of Jason, apparently. And, I understand. But, like, Jason looks really cool when he's there. I like his look, but he's barely in it. This is probably the most unique movie in the franchise, which is, I wouldn't call it good, but it's different. My score for this one is 2.3 out of 5. Moving on up, my number 8 is Friday the 13th, Part 3. I might get some flack for this, but frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Starting off with the positives, Richard Brooker is a solid Jason. He's not one of my favorites, but he makes the character his own. And most of the acting is at least decent, and it's well made from a technical standpoint. It was directed by Steve Miner, who also did Part 2, as well as Halloween H2O and Lake Placid. My one mixed aspect for this movie is the kills. Some of them are great, like the dude getting cut in half and then his girlfriend seeing him later.
I can't hear you. Where's this coming from?
Or the pitchfork impalement, where the camera pans down to show her feet hanging above the ground. That was kind of cool. Some of the kills are lame. Most of them are just kind of meh. Then there's this one. This kill is both awesome and awful at the same time. It exists between planes of quality. On to the negatives. First off, this movie gives Jason his hockey mask, but aside from that, it really doesn't bring anything new to the table. It's basically just a retread of the first two movies with less interesting characters, and the ending is literally just a rehash of the first movie's ending. Then it also has the worst stretch of acting in the entire franchise. Enjoy.
Andy! Debbie! Shirley's dead!
And also, this movie is kind of boring. It has plenty of fun moments, but it also has these long stretches where nothing interesting happens. And finally, it is clear that the 3D was a higher priority than things like plot and character. There are way too many just pointless, gratuitous 3D shots. This one is okay. I don't hate it, don't love it. My score is 2.4 out of 5. Alright, this one's going to get me a hater or two. My number 7 is Freddy vs. Jason. I totally get why people love this movie so much, but to see things from their perspective, I would have to put blinders on. Starting off with the positives, this movie does deliver on its title. The premise is solid, and every minute Freddy and Jason are on screen together is gold. The final battle is kick-ass. And I really like Will and Mark. They're a lot of fun to watch. Like Part 3, this movie's kills are a mixed bag. The practical effects are solid, but the early 2000s CGI is awful and they use way too much of it. On the negative side of things, most of the teenage characters suck. Will and Mark are fine, but the others, not so much. They're not the worst in the franchise, I've already covered those, but they are superficial and flat to the point where they can be hard to watch sometimes, and we spend way too much time with them, and not enough with Freddy or Jason. There's an effect that they overuse where everything goes flying when it gets hit. A lot of times it doesn't even make any sense. That don't make no sense. Now, I do enjoy this movie, but it's definitely not a good movie. My score is 2.5 out of 5. Now, on to the top half, on to the good movies. My number 6 is Friday the 13th, Part 2. Right off the bat, this movie has the best final girl in the franchise. Ginny is a great character and a total badass, and the whole climactic battle final girl sequence is great. This movie actually has a few characters that are kind of fleshed out a little. It's not much, but it's something. The kills aren't the best in the franchise. They're a step down from the first movie, but they're mostly good. It doesn't help that the MPAA censored them, and unlike Part 7, there's no additional footage available so we can see the original gorier versions, but most of them are fine. My favorite is definitely when Mark gets a machete to the face and falls backwards down the goddamn Odessa stairs. I also like this movie's Jason. I think he has a really solid look. On the other hand, this movie doesn't bring many new things to the table. It does bring a few new things, but not a whole lot. But it's more original than Part 3, whatever that's worth. And like Part 3, there are also a few boring stretches, but not nearly to the same extent. So it's fine. Overall, this is a pretty good movie. I enjoy it. My score is 2.9 out of 5. My number 5, don't hate me, is Jason X. A wise man once said that a movie doesn't have to be good to be awesome. This movie is proof of that statement. Starting off with the positives, unlike, well, half the franchise, this movie is never boring. It follows the same basic formula as most of the rest of the franchise. We get the opening kills, spend way too much time with the non-Jason characters, and then he starts killing again. But unlike the other movies, I didn't really mind spending time with the other characters. The tone of this movie is like not quite self-aware. And the actors all buy into it, so they're fun to watch even when Jason's not there. This movie also has some awesome kills. The liquid nitrogen is awesome. Sergeant Brodsky becoming a shooting star is awesome. I love it. Speaking of Sergeant Brodsky, he is one of those badass characters in the entire franchise. On to the negatives, this movie is one of the least scary in the entire franchise. I can't think of a single moment that is actually scary. And, well, the characters are fun to watch. None of them really get any development. Like, even the final girl doesn't get much. I mean, she gets a little bit, but not much. And this movie does stick to the established formula, and it doesn't really do anything different with that. It can be kind of predictable. Now, I wouldn't call Jason X a good movie, but it is one of the most enjoyable in the franchise. My score for this one is 3 out of 5. Alright, moving on. My number 4 is the original Friday the 13th. You almost never see this movie at the top or bottom when people rank this franchise, and, well, I'm no exception. Starting off with the good, the kills. Tom Savini's makeup is top-notch, and they get pretty creative. The arrow through the throat is awesome. Mrs. Voorhees' decapitation is awesome. Well, those are my favorites for sure, but there are some other great ones too. The only kill I'm not a fan of is Steve Christie. The two opening kills that are like below screen, I'm fine with that because that serves a purpose. It's to lure the audience into this false sense of security, like, oh, this movie isn't going to be that violent, and then they get violent, and the audience is like, oh crap, we were wrong, we were tricked. That's fine. But Steve Christie, this late in the movie, you got it. Having a lame kill like that this late in the movie was just pointless. I also like this movie's final girl. Alice isn't as fleshed out as some of the other final girls in the franchise, but she feels like a real person, and she's also a bit of a badass. And I really, really like the musical score. But I appreciate that unlike most of the sequels, they don't overuse it. Like, even the movies that I consider to be better than this one tend to overuse that music. In this one, this is also true in part 2, but I appreciate it more with this one. They only play the killer's theme when the killer is actually there. If the killer's not there, they don't use it. And speaking of the killer, Mrs. Voorhees is a great villain. Betsy Palmer gives a solid performance, and I will always love the reveal that the killer is a middle-aged woman and not, someone you would expect. On the other hand, this movie is not original at all. Like, the filmmakers have admitted that it is a clone of Halloween. It doesn't bring a whole lot of new ideas to the slasher subgenre. And aside from Alice and Mrs. Voorhees, none of the other characters get any development. They're just there to get killed. This is a really good horror movie. Not perfect by any means, but it's good. My score is 3.25 out of 5. Moving on to the top 3. My number 3 is the 2009 remake Friday the 13th. Starting off with the positives, this is the scariest portrayal of Jason in the entire franchise. Not necessarily the best, but definitely the scariest. I love that he's a lean survivalist killer. I love that he can outsmart his victims. This movie also has some of the most brutal kills in the franchise. The sleeping bag, roasting over the fire. axe to the spine, the machete to the head. They're awesome. This is also the best made movie in the franchise from a technical standpoint. It's well shot, well edited, and has good pacing. Director Marcus Nispel, who also directed the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, which I also like, has a background in painting, and both of these movies, they're very nice to look at. They make good use of color palette and framing. You can tell he has a good visual sense. I also really dig the music. There are a couple moments where it's kind of similar to the original's music, but for the most part, it does its own thing. I think it's really good music, especially during intense scenes. Something like that. I love it. I also like the characters, overall. Most of them get no development, but at least most of them are well-defined characters, like you get a good sense of their personalities. They are what this movie needed, and they're well acted, so that helps. And I also appreciate that this movie is not a direct remake of the original. It borrows elements from the first 4 movies, sprinkles in a little new stuff, and mixes it all together. So, I like that. On the other hand, this movie is kind of a rehash of the first 4 movies. It brings up some new stuff, but not a whole lot. It can get a little predictable. I also really, really don't like that they use that super cliche, the villain's not dead final scare. It's not scary, and you can see it coming a mile away. This is one of the better horror remakes I've seen, and it's a solid horror movie overall. My score is 3.5 out of 5. Down to the final 2. My runner-up is The Final Chapter. This movie may just be Jason killing teens in the woods, but it is a near-perfect version of that. The acting is solid overall. Crispin Glover and Corey Feldman are really good. Ted White is great as Jason, and most of the kills are great, especially Jason himself. The machete to the face is awesome enough, but then he falls and does that 10 out of 10 face slide, and it's awesome. And speaking of which, I love that they actually kill Jason. Yeah, this movie would have been a great ending to the franchise. It would have gone out on a high note. And there are also some great cliche dodges and subversions of expectations in this movie. For example, a common trope in this franchise and slasher movies in general is 2 characters have sex. The dude stays in bed or the bedroom while the girl goes and takes a shower. And Jason, or the killer, comes in and kills her, either in the shower or in or around the bathroom. In this movie, 2 characters have sex. The dude goes and takes a shower, and Jason kills him.
Hey, Paulie. Whoops. Dropped my bar of softball, buddy. Let's get in here with the old pal. Ho, 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 ho.
My one and only big problem with this movie is Mrs. Jarvis's death. It's another one of those just below screen kills. It's kind of lame. I really like this movie. It is a solid horror movie. Would have been a good end to the franchise. My score is 4.25 out of 5. Finally, my number 1 is Part 6, Jason Lives. Starting off with the positives, this movie does stay within the established formula of the franchise, but it has fun playing around inside that framework. You get action scenes like car chases and also a foot chase. The camp actually has kids for once, so yeah, extra high stakes. There's also great meta humor that undoubtedly helped inspire Scream 10 years later.
Why'd I have to go and dig up Jason? Some folks have a strange idea of entertainment.
I don't know if this is the first horror movie that did meta humor, but I know it was one of the first. Tom Matthews is great as Tommy Jarvis. In my opinion, he is the best of the three actors who have played Tommy. C.J. Graham gives my favorite overall portrayal of Jason. Jennifer Cook and David Carradine are both really good. All these movies have at least one good kill. This movie has like the most consistent quality of kills. My personal favorite in the entire franchise, actually, when Sheriff Garris attacks Jason to save his daughter.
Daddy, where are you? Daddy, no, not her!
I have no negatives for this movie. My one and only mixed aspect is the smiley face kill.
Not a game. Fly.
Some people love it, some people hate it. I don't love it or hate it. I can appreciate what they were going for. I feel like it's just a little too hokey. This is a genuinely great movie. I absolutely love it. My score is 4.75 out of 5.